good evening, good evening, Longhorn Nation.
Yes,
What
sir.
is up? It is an
Yes, sir.
exciting day, a day we've been waiting for, gosh, it seems like weeks now. Action-packed show. You guys know what
Right.
it's all about. The number one player in the state of Texas, we can finally say, has committed
Yes, sir.
to a hometown team, Texas Longhorns. Tim Wayne, my host. How you doing
Yes,
tonight,
sir.
man?
Man, listen, I'm excited. Listen, hope is a hell of a drug, but I'm excited. I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad the big domino has fallen. And man, we just a couple more weeks to week 0, just a couple more.
Absolutely. Before we get started, there's a lot to talk about, obviously. But first, let's do what is normal here for us at Longhorn Fan Battle. Give a shout out to fanbattlesports.com.
Yes,
I
sir.
do have an article that I'm writing about the commitment of Colin Johnson that I should have up this week,
Right.
probably Saturday or Sunday. Really talking about Colin Johnson or Colin Simmons. What does it mean for Texas moving forward? How it shapes us to keep us ready going. So that should be up on fanbattlesports.com. Shout out to Fan Battle Sports. If you are a fan of football, we've got content there and more coming in. Of course, you can follow the AFC South Fan Battle podcast there. And then, of course, your individual teams, the Colts, of course, the Texans, they're all right. CJ Stroud struggling. We won't talk about that. The Jaguars,
not the shot.
And of course, us here at Longhorn Fan Battle. So shout out to fanbattlesports.com. Also, please follow us on Twitter, Longhorn Fan Battle, at LH Fan Battle. And of course, hit us up on YouTube, Longhorn Fan Battle. Please follow us, comment, subscribe, do all the things that we're here to do. But Tim,
yes,
let's get to the good stuff, man. Let's get to the stuff that we are here for.
Let's get to it.
So, for those of you guys that don't know, Duncanville edge rusher, 5-star prospect, number 1 prospect in the country, in the state of Texas. I think depending on who you look like, he's where
number
you look
four,
at
number 3 in the country.
Number 4 in the country. I've seen as low as 26. We won't talk about that. I do think he shoots up the rankings as he goes through his senior year. What's crazy about today, real quick, just because you and I have been following the coverage on 24/7, Orange Blood, shout out to those guys. I was actually thinking that Colin Simmons was going to be late. So there's he was actually on Instagram Live before he got to the school talking about how he was stuck in traffic and all that stuff. So I was like, oh boy, here we go. Let the semantics begin. So he made it in time. His teammate, 4-star running back, does commit to LSU. So, it's one of those things. And I think we've known for a little bit. Actually, first, before I get into that, what is your initial reaction? How are you feeling? What are your thoughts?
So my initial reaction is a sigh of relief, but the work is still not done, right? Because this is not something, even though Colin has committed to the University of Texas, there are a couple of things that we'll cover those at a later time. But there are a couple of things that that still need to happen. You know what I mean? We still need to continue to recruit him. Just because he verbally commits today doesn't mean he doesn't have an opportunity to change his mind. So that's one thing. Another thing is that I'm excited because this could set a trend, right? The best player in the state of Texas has committed to the University of Texas. What does that say for everybody else, right? Usually, and this is just me being thinking from a football perspective, if the best player in the country or the best player in the state commits to the University of Texas, it instantly makes me look. I have to pay attention to that, especially if you're a kid that's being recruited. Maybe you haven't made up your mind yet. Maybe you're a Kobe Black. You don't necessarily know which way you want to lean. But if you got somebody like that breathing down your neck, and hitting quarterbacks and causing all types of ruckus, that to me, if I'm a defensive back or safety or anything like that, or maybe even another defensive lineman, that would give me cause to pause and be like, hey, I need to figure out what's going on at Texas because this kid just got, even though Texas may have reached out to me and they're looking at me, this is something that I may want to reconsider if I'm choosing an Oklahoma or an Alabama or a Georgia. If the best defensive player in the state of Texas is going, you have to actually take pause and look and see what's going on. So hopefully this is a domino effect and this brings on more and more and more and more players. The rich get richer. A lot of people thought he was a lock to go to LSU. For a moment there, I was pretty nervous about it. But as we got closer, and me and you have communicated over the weekend quite a bit in regards to the situation, it just looked like the domino was going to fall in Texas' favor, and luckily it did.
Yeah, absolutely. When I look at a commitment like Colin Simmons, there's a couple things, right? First off, this is not only is this the number one player in the state, which I can't remember the last time. We might have to go back as far as Corey Redding if we're talking about the number one player in the state,
right?
Committed to Texas, right?
Right.
But you look at the landscape of where the program is. Colin Simmons on the defensive side of the ball is an Arch Manning on the offensive side of the ball type recruit. You remember last year, you get Arch Manning, and then you get a slew of recruits. Kelvin Banks commits. Jonte Cook commits. You're starting to get those players. I think on the defensive side of the ball, you're kind of going to hope for the same domino effect, right? Dominic McKinley is supposed to, who's a 4-star edge rusher, is supposed to commit, I believe, on the 17th. Kobe Black, who actually Texas is heavily favored to land, 5-star cornerback. And you pair that with an Anthony Hill, who's already on the 40 acres here, right?
Right.
Now you're starting to build a defense that you can look forward to heading into the SEC in 2024.
Right.
But like you said, the job is not done. And the reason why I say the job is not done, recruiting is a 365-day a year type of thing moving forward.
Right.
And you have to stay on top of it. And it's not just off the field with as far as recruiting and all that fun stuff. It's on the field now, right? We can now faithfully say that Sark is an elite recruiter. Like, look at the talent that he's brought. He has brought his guys into Texas. But the one thing, and you and I, we've talked about it here. We've talked about it, offline. Sark, the only thing that's missing from Sark's resume, the guy has to win football games. Yo, J-Mac, what is good? How are you doing? How are you feeling tonight? Hope you're feeling good and toasty. Hope you're being safe out there because it is hot out here in East Texas streets. Or if you're not in Texas, hope you're staying safe and cool. But back to what I was saying, you have to win on the football field. And Sark has put together a roster that he's very confident in. I believe the other day he was mentioning, having the extensive amount of receivers that he has, not being worried about losing a Bijan in the running game and not being able to not run in the running game. We know Sark is known for 1,000-yard backs. Will we have that this year? I could probably say we'll find somebody, and I think it'll happen because it's just where Sark, that's what he does. But on the field has to happen, right? So we talk about the Colin Simmons commitment so far. What does this mean for Texas? And not obviously this year. It means a lot because you got to win on the football field. The one thing I do want to say before we get to this, Texas, from an NIL perspective, nobody touches Texas, right?
No, not even close.
We've talked about this 2 years ago, 3 years ago, even when NIL was being rumored to be approved, how we knew this was going to be the gaslighter. And I'm not here to pretend like, oh no, they love the culture. Look, that might play a part of it. At the end of the day, Texas has money, and money goes a long way here at Texas. Texas is one of the few schools that have shown that you can benefit from having NIL, right? When you have Jake Majors, who's probably going to get benched this year, running around in a Lamborghini, NIL is sweet and it is good. So I don't if NIL is something that Texas fans are worried about, Miami and LSU probably combined can't touch Texas when it comes to
Right.
NIL.
Right.
That's
Most
just the
definitely.
realization of the facts, right?
Right.
The one thing that is going to hurt Texas is if they fall backwards, right? A 7-5, 5-7 type season,
Yeah.
struggles and Sark doesn't grow as a coach. I think those are things to be cautious of, and I think that's why you need to have this play out through the season. Texas, in my opinion, has to win the Big 12 or it's a failure. What
Right.
happens beyond that? I think we can think about, but if we're talking about progress, especially heading into the SEC, Texas winning the Big 12 is a must.
Right.
So, what do you think this commitment does for Texas?
Again, to elaborate more on that domino effect, this really sways not only this current crop of incoming freshmen and again recruits that are in limbo. This puts in effect the future, right? So let's say we have a great season. Let's just hypothetically put this in motion, right? Let's say Texas comes in, they go 10-2, 11-1. They get a college football spot, or let's say they don't even get a college football spot. Let's say they get bounced out. Like, let's say some other team goes undefeated. Let's say USC or Michigan or somebody else goes undefeated, and Alabama, or heck, even a Clemson or Florida State. Let's say they go undefeated. Texas has one loss. You're still right there at the door. There's still something to argue about. And if you go 11-1, that means that you've moved up. You're growing, right? You want to be able to show to your recruits that you are growing, especially if you have a dominant defense. Because again, prior to start getting there, let's just be completely honest, the defense was not necessarily the best defense that was available, or they didn't utilize their talents as Tom Herman should have. So in this way, you improve your defense, you start to jump up in the in the rankings as far as defense. We went from a 3, I think we were in the low 100s, I think like 127 around that Tom Herman era. Now you're in the 30s. Again, take another step up from there. Now that shows these recruits like, hey, we're growing, we're maturing, we're not making these bonehead penalties that we did in the past, things of that nature. It's all good from there. So again, even and then let's say Collins comes in and he balls out. Now you have Anthony Hill Jr., you got Collins, they ball out. That's going to want to bring in more people, because people want to play with great players, right? People want to play with winners. That's
Yeah.
why Alabama is in the situation they're in right now. That's why Georgia's in the situation they're in. That's why uh, uh, Ohio State is the way they are, because people want to come in and they want to play with winners. Do they want to get a piece of the NIL money? Of course. Do they want to be on national TV? Of course. There's no bigger brand in college football outside of the big three: Ohio State, Alabama, Georgia. There's outside of that, there are no three bigger brands in the state, in the country outside of Texas. They are all in the upper echelon of brands. So when you start to win, things start to happen. And so yeah, that's what all this means, man. If the domino falls in the right place, things start to happen, things turn around, you'll attract more great players. And it'll be easier. They'll lock in easier. They'll graduate earlier. They'll come. I guarantee you, Collins will be on campus January of next year.
Oh yeah.
No doubts about that. He
Yeah,
will
absolutely.
he will graduate early after the playoffs. If they win another state title at Duncanville, he'll definitely graduate and he'll be on campus that following January.
I actually think Colin Simmons is a senior this year. I think he starts his senior year. So
Yeah, he starts his senior year, but
so he'll definitely be
that's
on
what
campus.
Arch did. So Arch, he graduated early, and then he
That's right.
ended up on
He
campus. So
rolled. Yep, he rolled.
instead of waiting until July or August or whatever, he'll be there. We'll see him at spring practice. And
Yeah.
if you think about it, guys, like, it's August right now. This is 4 or 5 months away. This is not a long period of time. A lot of this
Right.
stuff is happening really, really fast. So
Yeah.
again, back to what you were saying, we definitely need to continue to recruit him, and we need to continue to recruit and press so that when that time comes, he signs his letter of intent and he's in there in January. And hopefully we're playing in January. You know what I mean? That would just solidify it even more. If we're playing in January, it would just make it even more better.
I think that's just the icing on the cake, right? Winning the Big 12 title is absolutely necessary.
Right.
By any means possible, right?
Right.
Playing late in December, early January, New Year's Six Bowl, college football playoff, semifinal, national championship, it doesn't matter, right?
Right.
You want to be one of those top 10 schools that are playing in some way, shape, or form when December 31st rolls around, right?
Right.
We want to see that here around Texas. We've been aching for it for a very long time. The Texas haters that are like, hey, this is a championship trophy. This is a award. You guys are getting gassed up around the committee. Yeah, absolutely. People have to realize and I looked this up earlier, the last 5-star recruit on the defensive line that Texas committed was, I believe, Jackson Jeffcoat. And that was almost 14 years ago.
Right.
I think we've
had other 5 stars. We've had other 5 stars because Malik Jefferson was definitely a 5-star.
Yes.
He committed to Texas late, but we got him. So, we were able to get him away from A&M. So, I'm glad that you bring that up because we have had 5 stars on the defense, but as far as the defensive line is concerned, this is major.
This is huge for Texas. So we'll continue to watch that. Obviously, again, Colin. So a couple of things real quick, and Jason Sukamel of Orange Buzz reported this there shortly after the commitment. So there's a couple things to keep an eye on. Colin Simmons is still going to take his LSU official visit. I believe LSU Florida week, which might be 3. Okay,
week 9. Right.
So LSU Florida. So that's going to be big, right? We've got to make sure that it stays. Again, Texas has to keep winning. They've got to show that they can continue to win. Secondly, he also mentioned this was very interesting. So we've talked a lot about Bo Davis getting his guy.
Right.
Interestingly enough, and I tweeted this out earlier, the offensive line coach for Texas, Banks, is actually the reason. Colin States is the reason why he committed to Texas. Right. Again, Jeff Banks being the reason why, I'm not worried about that. At the end of the day, we got the guy, right? We got the guy that we need.
Right.
But I think it's interesting. We talked a lot about Bo Davis and how great of a coach he is, but how good of a recruiter is he? I don't think this is a knock against Bo Davis. I think Bo Davis is a phenomenal coach. Right. But it goes to show that you need a group of elite recruiters in order to recruit talent like this. I believe it was when Vince Young committed, the tight ends coach was actually the reason why he committed.
Brewster.
Yeah. He was the big reason why Vince Young committed. Yep. Yeah. So who the position coach that helps recruiting is irrelevant, right?
Right.
Got to get the guy on campus. You have to win, and you've got to set your defense up for the future. So obviously a great day for Texas fans. Celebrate, be happy, be mature. I mean, let's not be upset about an 18-year-old, 17-year-old kid, right? But we've got our guy, and it's definitely something to be excited about.
Yeah, it's definitely an exciting time, man. I can't wait to see what happens from now to the start of the season. Again, there are a couple more recruits out there that are in the process of making an announcement. Again, none of this is official until December, where they actually sign their letter of intent. So right now, this is just a verbal. We still got to recruit as far as the coaches and things of that nature. Still have to recruit because you don't want somebody else coming in. You don't want an LSU coming in and taking one of the top defensive players in the country and one of the number one guy in the state away.
Yeah, this is definitely not over, right?
Right.
It's a great start for us. So very, very excited for that. Now let's kind of shift gears here we're going to talk a little bit, go back. Last week we talked about conference realignment, right?
Right.
Obviously with the Big 12 adding some more schools.
Right.
They added Utah.
Right.
And they added Arizona State.
Right.
And then the Pac-4, which is the four nobody cares about, it's kind of left in limbo. You were mentioning earlier that there's some schools that might be headed to the SEC from the ACC. Why don't you talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about conference realignment.
So again, another major shakeup, and this started to pick up more steam around the time that Collins made his commitment about Florida State and Clemson, of all teams, looking to join the SEC. Now, of course, this is basically in response to what has happened over the last weekend and 2 weeks, where it was reported and then it actually came into fruition, where the Pac-12 basically kind of just dissolved in front of us. And then you've got other teams from the Pac-12 with Utah and Arizona joining the Big 12 next year. So, and then you've got Oregon, you've got UCLA, USC, and I can't remember what the other school is that took off to the Big 10. Washington, yep. I'm sorry. Yep. Yeah, Washington. This is big because right now the two top teams, or the two top conferences, is the Big 10 and the SEC. The SEC is the main dog. We all know what it is, but the Big 10 is creeping. That, and think about this: we're gonna see a Michigan versus USC game in December, and it could be in USC. How crazy is that? Nobody wants to go to the big house in December, but think about filling the Rose Bowl up in December with a dream matchup. Like, if these teams are what they're gonna be, right, and what everybody's projecting them to be, this is a bowl game. Like, this is a bowl game in the regular season, and this is nuts. So, I just kind of wanted to see how you felt about, the Big 12. They're getting their teams. The Big 10, they're getting their teams, but the SEC still looking to possibly add on two other big, because Florida State is a big time program. Clemson over the last 10 years, definitely a big time program. These guys are not, these aren't, by the wayside type of teams. These are national championship teams. Florida State has definitely made some moves over the last couple of years in recruiting. That is also a big deal. So with the addition of these two teams, how do you feel about that? Do you think that the SEC should just chill? Do you think that they should look to add them? What does this say about the ACC? Like, what are your feelings about that? Because I think it would actually do a big deal. And honestly, I hate to keep bringing up Notre Dame, but Jesus Christ, Notre Dame, if they want to keep the ACC alive, they got to figure out how to get Notre Dame in there. They got to figure out how to get them in there. It would be right. It would shift the balance of power. Okay, so now you would have your top three would be the SEC, the Big 10, and then the ACC. I wouldn't say that the Big 12 is still low, but those are not the most dominant teams. I wouldn't say that they're the most dominant teams. I mean, we could just be completely honest. They have a lot of those teams in the Big 12, or the teams that are going to be joining the Big 12, have not been the great teams in the last 10 or 12 years. So they have promise, but we still don't necessarily know yet.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, right? The Big 12 now becomes, I think, the most complete conference. And I think it's interesting, right? The SEC and the Big 10 are really top heavy.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the mid to lower tier schools in both of those conferences, they're okay. Right. The Big 12 has become the most complete conference, top to bottom. You don't have a lot of all these schools. The Big 12 is still going to be really hard to get through. I think it becomes even more difficult because you don't have to worry about a Texas or an OU anymore. You got a bunch of medium-sized schools, we'll just call them, that are fighting every single year, and that just brings competition. And competition is always good.
Right.
As far as Florida State, Clemson goes into the SEC, I think it's bound to happen. I mean, it makes sense, right? Especially for Florida State. They're in the state of Florida, right? It even makes sense for Florida State and Miami to join the SEC, right? They're in the state of Florida. They're in the South. So is Clemson, but they're like more like Southeast. I guess it's Southeastern Conference, so that kind of makes sense.
Right.
Look, I don't think we're done with conference realignment. I think this is, like we said back 3 episodes ago, this is really the NCAA, I think, has lost all handle of everything. And they are no longer going to be the beneficiaries of everything that's happening. So, yeah, I mean,
I don't mean to interrupt, but I definitely want to make a suggestion, and you tell me what you think, and we can move on from it. And it could be just a complete yes or no. So, let's say within the next 3 to 5 years, right? We've already looked at realignments, conference realignments, with 4 major conferences of the Power 5. Then we're continuing to add and move and add and subtract within those conferences. Wouldn't it be just right to just completely leave the NCAA, disattach from the NCAA, find a way to just move around from the NCAA and get a commissioner and just move from in that realm, like an overall commissioner, like a Dana White, David Sterling, or not Donald Sterling, Adam Silver, or like even a Vince McMahon. You could throw a Vince McMahon in there, whatever you decide. Do you think it'll be in college football will be in a better shape if they just completely remove themselves from the NCAA and set themselves up to where they actually have a commissioner in place by the powers that may be, by the powers that be, which would be you get your Power 5 guys to come in, they interview who they feel like is a great candidate, and then pick a commissioner to oversee college football.
Yes, I do. And I think I saw something that teased something like this. I think you just get rid of conferences altogether, right? You have two you have 2 leagues, like a Western Conference and an Eastern Conference. You split it down the middle between your Power 5s. You get rid of these different conferences. You play a real schedule every year. You might play people in your conference more, and you play an out of conference once or twice a year. And then you have a big 16, 2014 playoff at the end of the season. Like, I do think this is a more realistic thing. I didn't see it 10 years ago, right? I saw it 5 years ago. But like I said, the NCAA is now a commissioner I would be totally down for, because the NCAA, I can't stand the organization. It's a money grabbing organization, right? They'll be okay if it disbands, right? No, I wouldn't be opposed to it at all. I think you just split it down the middle. You have 2 conferences, a West and an East, or whatever you want to call it, North versus South, whatever. It doesn't matter how you want to call it. And you have a commission that oversees the whole thing. I would not only would I not be surprised, I think it's much more preferable.
Right. Okay. Yeah, I definitely I kind of like where you're going with that, where you're saying the splitting of the conferences, and you just kind of break it down. What I would like to see is a North, South, East, West.
Yeah.
Make it very simple, right?
Yeah.
You're in the South, this is where you're at. You're in the North, this is where you're at. This is where you're at. You could, whether you're Northwest or Northeast, we can figure that out. You can break that down even more. But North, South, East, West, break it down, get a commissioner in there, get a commissioner that will be able to oversee everything, create some new bylaws, nothing crazy, but create some new bylaws. Hell, maybe even keep the same bylaws that the NCAA has, but improve upon them, and then have them voted on, and then go from there.
No, I would be, I'd be totally down for that. I think that's where we go anyway. Eventually. Now, is it 3 to 5 years? I don't think so. I think that's more of like a 10-year thing.
Right.
But I definitely agree that I think that's where the NCAA is heading. whether it's under the NCAA. I wouldn't be surprised if it was still under the NCAA, but a commissioner over the whole thing.
Okay.
So that'd be interesting. So segues, and before we get to week 3 predictions, because I'm actually really excited for week 3 predictions, because this is where I think it's really, really fuzzy for me.
Right, me too.
But before we do that, there are a couple of polls that came out and a couple of predictions. We'll call them Twitter predictions, right? And I'm going to share some things here before we get started, and I want to start with this image right here, and this is something we pulled from Twitter. It basically talks about the On3 Sports. They did their New Year's 6 predictions for bowl games, and this includes the college football playoff.
Right.
And there's some matchups here, and we'll kind of break down what this means, and then I kind of want to get your thoughts on this. So, sorry, I need to make the screen bigger because my eyes cannot see for whatever reason. So, give me a second. We've got On3 Sports tweeted this out earlier.
Via
CBS. CBS Sports tweeted this out earlier, and based on what we see here, they believe as of today that the top 10, this is top 10, top 12 schools are Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Georgia, Florida State, LSU, Boise State, which I think is very interesting.
Right.
USC, Kansas State, Penn State, Texas, and Clemson. Right. The top 2 games at the top is what they believe are the college football playoff, because the Sugar Bowl and the Rose Bowl is the semifinals, are the semifinals for this year.
Right.
And then the next 4 games, or 8 teams, are basically the New Year's 6, and then your 2 bowls in between. So looking at this, Tim, what are your initial reactions to this?
Well, they're not high on Oklahoma. That's the number one thing that jumps out to me. Number 2, the Big Ten is real strong in this picture, or in this prediction, and that they actually believe that Texas will live up to the hype. When you're looking at this, when I'm looking at the top 4, they don't see Michigan losing, and they don't see Ohio State losing. And so when that's all said and done, there's potentials for these guys to be rematch. This could be rematches from either way. If you got Michigan and Ohio State, we all know that they play the last game. Georgia, that means that Alabama and Georgia would meet up in the SEC championship. One of those guys have to lose. So that means that nobody's basically going undefeated. Nobody. Maybe 1 or 2, but not too many of them are going undefeated. Somebody with 1 loss is getting into the college football playoff. And it's going to be late in the season, because like we discussed, I think week 1, we don't see Alabama really losing to anybody but Texas or Georgia. We don't see Ohio State really losing to anybody but possibly Michigan or Penn State. But they got to get, the thing is, they got to get to the championships to do that. So that means if these teams are going to be strong, they're going to be strong throughout the year, and they don't, even with a 1 loss, they're still looking at them potentially being a threat to win the national championship. Now, 2 losses, now you're in the lower tier. And that is where things get a little shaky, because I don't understand how they see LSU playing Florida State. That's a little iffy to me, but I'm not mad at it. Boise State versus SC, I don't see that. I don't see Boise State just wrecking everybody. But again, they have a favorable schedule. We don't necessarily know how that's going to go. Penn State, that means Penn State's lost 2 this bottom tier, where you got Penn State, Kansas State, Clemson, and Texas. Those teams, they either lost 1 that they shouldn't have lost, or they lost 2, and they still got in the New Year's 6. That's what that means to me. So the top 1 losses. They met in the championship and they still lost. That second row there, 1 loss teams, 2 loss teams, runner-ups, and those bottom 2 are 2 loss teams. So that's what I'm looking at from right now. Those bottom tier teams in the Big 12, Kansas State probably lost a game or 2. Texas probably lost a game or 2. Same thing with Clemson and Penn State. That's what that means to me.
The first thing that pops out to me is I hate that they call it the Verbo Fiesta Bowl. I missed it. I missed the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, man. I mean, that's like iconic, right? That's what we grew up. We grew up on the Tostitos Fiesta Bowl, and we just don't have that anymore, right? So that's the number one thing I noticed right off the bat. Number 2, if you look at where they have Kansas State and Texas in their bowl games, they have Kansas State in the Cotton Bowl, and they have Texas in the Peach Bowl, which means they have Texas as the Big 12 champion. Because I think the Peach Bowl is considered higher than the Cotton Bowl. Could be wrong about that. That's just what my mind says, because it is a former BCS bowl, if you will, right?
Right.
3 SEC schools doesn't surprise me, right? Actually, technically 4 because Texas is an SEC school. Just kidding. But there's that. When it comes to I just don't see. Hot take: Alabama does not make the college football playoff.
Ooh.
And I think it starts with the loss to Texas, which we've already talked about, right? I think we see that we see that. I don't want to call it the demise of Nick Saban, because I think that's a very dangerous word to see, and I don't want Nick Saban coming after me. So I don't want to call it the demise of Nick Saban. But Florida State. The other thing I noticed off the bat is you see historic schools. You see this. You see Penn State. You see USC. You see Florida State. The good teams are good again, and good is healthy.
Right.
For college football, right? You want your blue bloods to be really good, and this shows just that. Also, I see the last thing I see is you have a conflict of interest, so I don't know what you would pick in your bowl game.
Right.
Because we know you are an underground Clemson fan. That is your number 2 school, whatever that means. And
I forever bleed burnt orange, right? Forever.
I'm just saying.
But by the grace of the NCAA gods and NCAA football, Clemson, I have grown fond of Clemson. I actually took a trip out there as a kid when I was at David Chapel Missionary Baptist Church in Austin, Texas. We were doing college trips. That was one of the areas in where we was able to go by, see the campus and things of that nature. So, yeah, I do like Clemson. This is prior to Dabo, so you guys all get all like, oh, you like Clemson. This is way documented, way before Dabo got there. We're talking CJ Spiller, we're talking DeAndre Hopkins, we're talking Taj Boyd, Deion Kane. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about that era of Clemson Tigers. That's where we're talking. So I mean, what do you think that this is possible? Like how do you feel?
Anything's possible?
Right. I mean, but do you think that this is a fallout? Now, you did mention that you don't think Alabama's going to be there. So, and I don't want to get too big into a prediction so far. We can wait. We got a couple more weeks before we get into that. But who do you replace that Michigan team with, or that Alabama team with?
No idea, but it's not going to be Alabama. I don't know who yet. I think there's a team that he expects that sneaks in there, and I don't think it's Texas, by the way.
Okay.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up. I don't think it'll be, but I wouldn't be shocked if it was.
Right. Okay.
The next thing I want to look at real quick is the top 16. So this list came out shortly after Colin Simmons commits to Texas, right?
Right.
What I want to talk about when it comes to this is This is the top 16 schools done by 24/7 Sports again. Of the top 16 jobs in the country today.
Right.
And I think what's interesting about this is Georgia's number one. Obviously, Kirby Smart's built probably the next dynasty there, right? The interesting thing about this is Texas is actually the number 2 school on this list now. Sark's recruiting, whether he stays or not at Texas, makes this job very interesting for the next person.
Right.
If Sark doesn't survive, right? If he doesn't last, very interesting as the next person to take over this program.
Right. Regardless of what people want to say, or regardless of how people feel about the University of Texas, Texas within itself is just a sexy pick to begin with. Regardless of how Texas is doing, prior to Sark, or during the Sark era, the state itself, Austin itself, it sells itself, right? Great weather or hot weather for the majority of the year. I mean, Christmas is like 70 degrees. So if you're from Texas, you understand. You and I both know how the 70-degree weather is in December. It's great. It feels great. You can go outside. You can, in December, shorts and flip-flops, and you can go to a ball game and be good. And at night, it'll be in the 50s, maybe 40s if it gets super cold. That's within itself. The city of Austin, one of the most booming cities in this freaking country in the last 10 to 12 years, has been Austin, Texas. That's neither here nor there. That's not hard. Is it expensive to live here? By God, yes. But it's a sexy city. It's easy to recruit. You're in Central Texas. You have Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, all falling right around you. So you're surrounded by Louisiana. You got Arizona to the left of you. You got California. That's a 4-hour flight. How long does it take to get to California?
3.5, 4 hours. 3.5 hours, depending on where you go.
So you're in a major hub, so you can travel just about anywhere in the country and get there in a very short amount of time. It doesn't take time to get anywhere if you're on a plane or a private jet. Because if you're at the University of Texas, chances are you're probably going to have a private jet. So the recruiting trail, getting in and getting out, that's not going to be hard. That's just not going to be hard at all. And so, being Texas, honestly, I would say Texas should be number 1. I'm not saying that I'm not saying that as just being a homer. I'm saying that from the perspective of look at where you are in the state. Or within the country, it's easy to get around. You got great cities. Boom. That's Georgia's sexy because you have Atlanta, Georgia. You got Savannah. You got tons of other areas within Georgia. It's a beautiful state as well. I don't necessarily know how the weather is over there. I do know they get quite a bit of snow, but it makes sense. Now, here's where I think you should switch stuff around. Alabama should be number 5. Alabama should be number 5. And here's why. LSU, Baton Rouge, if you've heard anything about Baton Rouge, it is the place to be.
Yeah. That was actually a reason why I was worried about Colin Simmons committing, because he talked a lot about how he loved this city, how Baton Rouge was really cool. They treated him well. The history of the food is great.
Right.
And I don't know if there's any foodies out there, but I like food, and I've heard the food is great. And I've never been to Baton Rouge or New Orleans or Louisiana for that fact.
Louisiana is top 10, one of the best states I've been to. And I've been to a lot of states throughout the southeast region of the United States. Like that, Louisiana, they got a special place in my heart. They got a special place in my heart. But yeah, when it comes to just a sexy overall pick, LSU over Alabama. I'm sorry, there's nothing against Alabama. I've been at Alabama, but there's nothing really there to offer students other than football. Not to say that they need to focus on it, but I'm just saying, like, being able to sell it outside of Nick Saban and Alabama prior to Nick Saban being there, in the 80s and 90s, you couldn't sell it. Like,
Yeah.
let's just be completely honest. That's why Nick Saban was there, is because they needed somebody. They needed to get somebody in there to win. And so for the 90s and early 2000s, that was just not the place to be until Nick Saban got there. So
And
now
it'll go
it's
back to that once Nick Saban retires.
right. Now it's number 3 because of what Nick Saban has built. We're going based off of what Nick Saban has built.
Right.
If you remove Nick Saban, and don't get me wrong, there's players that come out of Alabama and have come out of Alabama way before Nick Saban has gotten there. I'm not dogging Alabama, but I'm saying how to sell it. You can even say, honestly, that you can put A&M in that top, like that top 5. You
because
can put A&M, because A&M is different. It is
right.
just different. To me, Clemson and Tennessee, you should move them up. Notre Dame, I'm sorry, it's in the middle of nowhere. I'm not a fan of that. And I'm going based off of location. We know that they won recently. Oklahoma is really hard to. Oklahoma, you're going based off of history and tradition, right? So we do have to put that into perspective, but it's really hard to put that into perspective because not all kids think like that. Not all kids are thinking like, oh, Auburn is great, but it's Auburn.
Right.
Auburn, Alabama is not a sexy city. I'm just being honest. It's not. Great program, great tradition, but it's not a sexy city. So you're going there based off of tradition and if they're winning. That's all I got to say about that.
No, I would agree. I would probably move Tennessee up. Right. I would argue
Knoxville is great. Knoxville and Nashville.
I used to live in Knoxville. I still remember Knoxville's the reason why I got into sports, right?
Right.
I used to live in Knoxville. So absolutely, I'm all for Knoxville, Tennessee. Neyland Stadium is a phenomenal environment.
Right.
And you got Gatlinburg. You got things to do around the Knoxville area. Nashville is only 2.5 hours away, and Nashville is the bachelorette capital of the world. A&M, I mean, again, I don't care for A&M, but A&M has NIL money. Let's just be honest. They have money. So that's easily sellable. I would actually bump up Florida State.
Okay.
You talking about the state of Florida?
Right.
Now, I don't know where I wouldn't put them above I wouldn't put them above a Tennessee or an A&M, but I wouldn't even put them. I mean, Florida is. I think Florida State. You kind of have to put it side by side, right? We're talking about the brand plus where they are, right?
Right.
Gainesville is there, but Tallahassee is again just a really cool city to go to, from what I hear.
Right.
But anyway, just an interesting thought there. We'll go ahead and put that away. Let's get to back to some other things. And the last couple of weeks, and real quick before we do that, and thanks for reminding me because I almost forgot. I apologize. We do have some chats here that we want to address. Keith, what's up, man? How you doing? Hope you're doing well. Keith? Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it. The NCAA is dead. Long live the NIL. Completely agree. Long live the NIL. NIL means long live Texas. So we will be fine. And then J-Mac, look, my man Manning needs to get to play and go deep. Listen, there is a clip, and I'll preface this with this. And I'm going to put this back up real quick. Arch Manning will not see the field this year unless it's in garbage time. I don't think he's even going to be the 2 quarterback. He might be get a few snaps that first game because we should dust those first couple games, right?
Right.
But Arch Manning is the future of this program. Whether that's next year or the year after, we'll have to wait and see because Malik Murphy is still there, and he looks really good.
Malik Murphy looks fantastic.
But as a Manning fan, pretty much my entire life, I'm very excited to see Arch Manning play, and I now get to watch a third Manning in my lifetime. Lace up. So I'm very excited about that. And then Lynn, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Michigan, Georgia, Alabama, Florida State as his top 4. Surprises. Florida State is a team that should win the ACC or at least challenge for the ACC.
Right.
We don't know what Clemson's going to be. They stumbled a little bit last year, but they ended up finishing 10-2, right?
Right.
Did they win the ACC last year?
I want to say no.
Okay.
I want to say no. I could be. Maybe they went 9-3.
Okay. Well, okay. They went 9-3. Florida State also has a really good quarterback coming back. Travis. I can't remember his first or last name, but Travis is in his name. So another school to keep out for. I actually really like Penn State. That's a team that I want people to watch out for.
Okay.
I think Penn State is a dark horse. Now, what does that mean? I don't know. But they play Michigan. They play Ohio State. You win or you split both of those games, you really change your narrative. So
yeah.
Appreciate that, Colin Thurland. Thanks for tuning in. We appreciate it.
Yes, sir.
Next thing we need to talk about is finally, and we'll end with this, is Longhorn predictions week 3. So the last couple of weeks, we've been doing 3 games at a time, just kind of going game by game and not really giving score predictions, but just giving like, all right, do you think we're going to win? Do you think we're going to lose? And so far, neither of us think we're going to lose a game yet. Right? So we each have us at 6-0.
Right.
That's Rice, Bama, beating Alabama in Tuscaloosa, which would be huge. Wyoming, Baylor, Kansas, and of course Red River. This week we have 3 very, very interesting games.
Right.
That I think we should break down. 2 of them are 2 newcomers to the Big 12.
Yep.
And we'll start there. So Texas at Houston, October 21st. What you got?
So at Houston, I definitely think that this is going to be a blowout. I think this is a game where it may start out. It may be a little bit of a tussle at the beginning of the game. At the beginning of the game, I think Texas just has more talent. U of H, they have been known to be giant killers. They did in the past. They have taken down top-rated teams like a UCLA. They've taken down top-rated teams like an Oklahoma. They've done that before. They have been a thorn in Oklahoma's side a couple of times. But that's been well over 5 years now. So well over maybe even well over 7 years now. But I just don't think that U of H is ready to really take the Big 12 by storm this year. Again, we don't necessarily know. Anything could possibly happen. There could be catastrophic injuries. We hope that doesn't happen on any team. We don't want any catastrophic injuries because we want to beat the best at their best. But I don't see U of H being a threat. I don't see BYU being a threat. I think BYU at the same time, same situation. I'm glad we don't have to play at BYU. BYU has been a thorn. Taysom Hill did run us out of the building a couple years back. I don't know if you remember that. Taysom Hill, I
remember it very well, and I don't want to remember it ever again.
Right. He was riding a bike. If you guys remember that, saying, that was a saying years back. That was during the Charlie Strong era. And that's where things kind of took a turn for the worse. We did play against BYU at the end of Mac's career at the University of Texas, and that was unfortunate. The way things just kind of fell off the rails there, that was very shocking, but that did happen. So the last couple of meetings, BYU has had Texas's number. I don't think that happens this year. Now Kansas State. This is where Texas loses. I hate that we're playing Kansas State in November. We normally play them like mid. Well, no, we usually play them. Around this time. Usually play them around this time. I don't like the fact that we're playing them at the top of October. We just never really do great against Oklahoma. I mean, we just never really do great against Kansas State or Tech. Again, we'll talk about Tech next week, but those are always the 2 thorns. I think to me, it's always Texas Tech, Kansas State, Oklahoma. Kansas State, I think, is going to get in a situation where they can be in the Big 12 championship. and they're gonna beat Texas. This is the one thing. This is where Texas overlooks Kansas State. They just throttled BYU. I'm gonna call that a blowout. I think they're gonna throttle BYU. And they're looking at TCU. And TCU and BYU, I mean, Kansas State is gonna get in here and they're gonna pop Texas. And it's gonna be at home and it's gonna suck. And a lot of people are gonna think, that with that loss to Kansas State this late, that gets them out of the Big 12 title race. Because if Oklahoma's doing any good, now we got a 3-team situation, possibly a 4. If they think Kansas or Tech can live up to the hype, now we're in a situation where you got 4 teams in a race. You got to win out. Kansas State and TCU right next to each other, I don't like it. So I think Kansas State gets Texas. I think they catch them slipping, and they catch them slipping close.
Okay.
What are your thoughts?
So I don't even care to talk about Houston or BYU. I think we throttle both of those teams. If not for the only reason that you could always go in and beat a team once as a mid-major and do something a little bit different.
Right.
It's a little bit different being a part of a conference and doing the same thing, right? Now, could they catch us off guard and we slip one? Maybe. But this is where, at this point in the season, in this particular season, this is where I hope Sark takes that next step and he focuses 1 week at a time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't look ahead, don't look behind, focus on that week. And I think I would want to hope that Sark does that, and I'm just going to be optimistic about it. I think we lose to Kansas State as well.
Man.
What's very, very interesting, and I was just looking this up, as much of a pain as Kansas State has been for us, just from a pain point perspective, we actually haven't lost to Kansas State since 2017.
Yeah, but
we haven't lost to Kansas State in 6 years, and that was with Charlie Strong, that was with Tom Herman. And that was the last time we lost to Kansas State was 2016 in Manhattan by 3 points. But every game has been close, besides the one in 2020 where we blew them out the water.
Right. And just so you guys know, I just kind of want to go over Kansas State's I want to go over their schedule really quick. They play Southeast Missouri. They play Troy, Missouri, UCF, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, TCU, U of H, at Texas on the 4th. They play Baylor, Kansas, and Iowa State. That is a very favorable schedule. I can see them winning against Missouri, UCF, Oklahoma State, Texas Tech. They don't have to play Oklahoma this year. TCU, we don't know what they're going to look like. I can see them playing, they're going to be at TCU. They could possibly drop that. U of H, Texas, Baylor, Kansas, Iowa State. Those are all winnable. And they play in 22 days. This is all favorable. This is a really crazy schedule. So this kind of ties back into that other schedule where they had the New Year's 6 predictions. I could understand why they have them there. Look,
yeah, I do. I can too.
Look at the schedule. It's favorable. Outside of maybe 2 games, it's favorable.
Yep.
So I'm scared of it. I don't like it. I think this is where it drops the ball. Again, this goes back to where we started. This goes back to the very foundation that we laid when we started this podcast, is that, hey, you have to be able to go week by week, verbatim. You cannot drop the ball in this. You can't.
Yeah.
You can't. So I didn't think Texas was going to go undefeated. I'm not silly. You know what I mean? And based off of the history, they do have the opportunity. They do have the firepower. They do have the talent to go undefeated. But being realistic, you have to look at things and where they could drop the ball. And this is definitely one of those things. Now, if they go into Alabama and they blow Alabama out, I think Alabama is way more talented than Kansas State. But man, that I can't overlook it. That specific game, I just cannot overlook. I just can't do it. I can't say that is a for sure win.
The only way that I think if Kansas State win or if Texas gets this far and they're undefeated as we think they will be, right?
Mm-hmm.
By this point they'll be 8-0, right?
Right.
If they win that game, it'll be because Quinn Ewers has grown up and he has an amazing game.
I agree.
And it could be, I'm not saying it will be, it could be his Heisman moment.
Ooh, it could be.
Could be.
It could
every,
be.
every Heisman winner has one. Could be his Heisman moment. Not saying it will be. It could be his Heisman moment. Okay. Very, 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 very good possibility. But I don't see it happening. I do think they drop this game. Not saying Quinn doesn't play well. I do think they drop this game.
Right. So the last three games that we have Texas, Christian, TCU, Iowa State, and Texas Tech. And we'll finish off what we think, and eventually get to who we think is going to be in the Big 12 championship. We'll keep that covered. So you guys make sure that you come back in next Thursday. Make sure you follow us as we'll be talking about that as we get closer and closer to the next airing. Man, I'm really hoping, and it took me a while because I was looking at these last 6 games. I was looking at those, and I just TCU.
There's some trippy games there.
That Kansas State game in particular, for some reason, it just sticks out. Now, one thing I will say is that I'm happy that we're not playing in Kansas State in November because it gets cold up there.
One thing, looking at this schedule, the one team I'm happy we don't play
is
Oklahoma State. I'm so happy we don't play Oklahoma State.
Right, because we normally struggle against them too.
That's when the cheaters come out, and AKA the Big 12 refs. And, I don't need any 14-0 penalty games. I don't need none of that crap.
Right.
So I'm glad we don't have to see Oklahoma State this year. I'd much rather see Kansas State and struggle and win that game than go to Oklahoma State or play Oklahoma State and get cheated out of a game. Because, as we know, Texas and Oklahoma are bound to be cheated out of a game this year. It is bound to happen. Now, do we lose the Kansas State game because we get cheated out? I don't know. But I think there's one game where the refs try really, really, really hard. I don't know which game.
Last year for me, that was TCU. That TCU game, we should have won that game. We did not.
We should have won a lot of games last year.
We should have won that game last year. There was a lot of ticky-tack calls that were called in that game. I was there at that game. It was cold. Yeah. And we should not have lost that game. Actually, it was not cold. It was actually very warm, and it was in the middle of November. But we should not have lost that game.
I agree. All righty, Tim. We had an action-packed show.
Yes, sir.
Colin Simmons verbally committed to Texas. We had a good old time today. We talked a little bit about conference alignment. We talked a little bit about the schedule and some Twitter predictions. We're going to end on this. Once again, guys, please, fanbattlesports.com. Visit us on the website. I should have an article up this weekend about the Colin Simmons commitment. And we'll continue to write some articles. Follow us on Twitter, Longhorn Fan Battle, and also follow us on YouTube, Longhorn Fan Battle. I do see some folks here watching us on YouTube, and I do appreciate that. Please follow, please like, please subscribe, please comment. Tim, before we head out of here, where can the folks find you?
You can find me at Tim Wayne on Twitter, or X as they're calling it now. You can find me there. You can find me on Instagram as well at Tim Wayne. But, I'm more active on Twitter, so I would just say just follow me on Twitter.
Awesome. And you can find me on Twitter at the Uncle Gandhi, X, whatever you want to call it. Also interact with us on the Longhorn Fan Battle Twitter channel. As we mentioned before, you can also find me Tuesday nights on the Horseshoe Mob podcast with Colts fans. You can find me on Sunday nights every now and then on the AFC South Fan Battle podcast. But between now and then, my name is Harish. That's my guy, Tim Wayne.
Yes, sir.
Peace.
We got him, baby.